Let's go ahead and call ourselves to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Herbert. Here. Mr. Brennan.
Present.
Mr. McDowell.
Yes.
Mr. Ball.
Present.
Mayor Richard.
All right. Let's have a word of grace together. For this day and the beauty thereof, for the promise of your presence that we've actualized this morning, getting up and stirring about. We come to this place to discuss and of course to hear presentations as our city continues to elongate itself, as the residents are impacted with usable knowledge and information. Touch us individually and yet collectively. Allow us to sense and feel your nearness. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Madam City Manager?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem McDowell. We want to continue with our budget workshop discussion items, and they were delving into the general fund, which is really going to wrap up the budget discussions. We will talk to you about all of the funds and a lot of good information today to share, to include something really important to me, and I'm hoping I'll touch on and get some feedback from you all on our retention and recruitment strategies for the city. But we'll start with just an overview of the fiscal year 2023-2024 general fund budget. Ms. Missy Kaufman. Missy, take a breath before you start. It's always a marathon, and we're getting there. So she is our budget program management and grants director.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Wilson and City Council and Brussels. Good to see you all today. And as Wilson mentioned, we have been having quite a few sprints. So glad we are on our starting to see the finish line of our 23-24 proposed budget. The general fund budget, we end up coming to the general fund sort of last. It really is probably one of the most important in the sense because it is the budget that operates the main parts of the city. It falls under. So the general fund budget is the main fund of the budget. And, at this point, although water and sewer is now way surpassed the general fund in terms of total amounts, but important nonetheless. So the general fund proposed budget is 170 million. That's an increase of 5.7 million or 3.5% over the current year budget. Of course, the general fund, as mentioned, it supports the day-to-day operations of the city. The city manager seeks to provide to the council a budget that aligns with your strategic priorities, as well as managing meeting interests and, of course, managing limited resources. The general fund budget has to be in balance at the time of advertisement. And we will talk about our notice requirements as we wrap up our discussions today. So the city manager's proposed budget meets those goals of balancing priorities. As mentioned, the general fund proposed budget is 170.5 million, 3.5% over the current year. Revenues are projected at 146. The reason is that the 170 million is comprised of both revenues as well as transfers and other financing sources. Revenues total 146 million, that's 4.8 or 3.4% over the current year budget. And total transfers is 23.8, which is an increase just shy of $1 million or right at 3.9% over current year budget. In terms of our general fund discussion of revenues, just a little note on sort of where we are and what we're seeing. Revenues over current year or in prior year actuals is right at 9.9 or right just shy of $10 million over prior year actuals. That's a little over 7% of what we collected in the prior year. And I know we're getting away from saying or referencing the pandemic, but of course, when we look at revenues over the past year, that was still revenues that we're seeing coming out of the pandemic. So we We feel like this is aggressive, but still moderately conservative with regards to prior year actuals. More than 70% of the general fund revenues is made up of property taxes, business license, and permits. This is based on property tax collections or property tax millage of 93.8 mils. That's the same as current year and the same as in prior years, so no proposed property tax increase. It does reflect an increase of about 10% to the hydro fees that we discussed in previous council meetings. That is being proposed as a funding mechanism for the proposed fire payment.
Misty,
Yes, sir.
the 93.8, that is a reduction from what it's been in the past because of reassessment.
Correct.
And how long has it been since we had a millage increase?
It's been at least 10, I was trying to calculate this out. So at least 13 years.
So,
14 years.
So we had,
for 13 years, the city has not raised the millage and has reduced the millage according to the reassessment every 5 years.
We've actually had, yes, we've had at least one reassessment since we were at the current mill rate. It was reduced, the last reassessment reduced millage from 98.1 to 93.8. We did have, and there's difference in opinion as to whether or not this was a tax increase. We actually did drop mills by 2 1 year and then came back a year or two later and adjusted it back. So those two netted out that net increase in terms of calculating how long it's been since we actually had a property tax increase.
And that 93.8 is about 16 or 17% of the total millage that people see on their tax bills.
Yes, sir, that is correct. A Richland County resident, City of Columbia resident in Richland County, this represents less than 17% of their total property tax.
So if we're 17 and they're 17, that's about 34.
Yes,
So the rest of that would be the school district.
school districts and other millage agencies. The zoo, the library,
Zoo library and all
mental health. Those are also very much, I mean, collectively, they make total 40%.
Right.
Of course, as we're noting, 7% growth of the prior year actuals, of course, is, as we mentioned, aggressive for us in the sense, but taking into consideration where we were over the past 24-month period with revenues, we know it's still in line. So we are, of course, observant of the fact that revenues are low growth. Any other questions on revenues? Excuse me. Got choked. Transfers in again. They make up 14% of the total general fund budget. Accommodations tax is remaining at 25,000. We have adjusted the hospitality tax transfer to 4 million, which reflects the $300,000 that City Council adjusted in the current year for continuation of beautification efforts.
And I'll add, Missy, while we're on that point, I know in our last discussion, there was attention brought to the beautification efforts and are continuing that. So we've met with Robert and the team to, needless to say, who's responsible for what. We're gonna still work with DOT to let them know that the medians and that type of thing need to be addressed. But we know in some of the highly trafficked areas that are most visible, we're gonna just have to do what we have to do. And so we feel like these additional funds to continue that effort will allow us to address some of those areas that were brought up as a concern.
so what is the position of DOT as it relates to that?
I know he doesn't want to have to move. Thank you, Robert.
So currently, they have not responded to any of the
I
needs,
thought so.
and they're claiming they have the funding for the positions to do that.
Well, we knew that was going, I just wanted to make sure that that was gonna be the answer.
Understood.
Thank you, Robert.
Is that in writing to us?
It is not, it was
Someone put it in writing.
in a meeting, it was in a meeting with the mayor and
Tell them to put it in writing and I'll write an op-ed about it.
Okay, I will have them do it. So,
Perfect.
And we have good, I mean, Robert and those, his counterparts at DOT, you know, obviously they can only do what they're authorized to do, but we work together really well. So we're gonna keep at it.
Well, it's just a shame that the State House doesn't have the same sense of pride as when it comes to how our cities and our counties, you know? It's, you take a lap around the State House, right, Missy?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I raised the question. I knew initially they would not have any money to do anything.
Mhm.
And it's almost like we're taking on that full burden.
Yeah.
And that could be cost prohibitive at some point. But on the other side of that, I think Petey is correct. I think there needs to be something done, something said that would at least say to DOT, we need to have you to shine that spotlight on those areas that we really need to beautify. And with some money, yeah.
And I completely support future funding via H-Tax for that, or if not more. You know, if you want something done,
Being the capital
the
definitely
funding
brings
stuff,
tourists.
absolutely, coming in on our major thoroughfares. What's the first impression people have,
Yeah.
you know?
And in general, I think DOT focuses so much more on highways that they don't think about the fact that Jamaica Street is technically a highway, right? So
US #1.
there you go. And I think we need to use our platform
And that's
to
right through the
remind legislators that, you know, the majority of roads in Columbia are actually owned by DOT. And they have a role in making sure that things look good.
The reason they're not held accountable is because they're not held accountable.
Yeah.
Without some sunshine on this, without somebody, you know, without them saying, here's our position, and without us saying, hey, we'd like to have a different position from DOT, and then maybe you can close the gap. But, you know,
Absolutely.
them saying, you know, we're not interested is not a great start.
Missy, before you, don't change.
Okay.
Before you leave property tax, I got another property tax.
Okay,
How much of that 62 million is paid by the local option sales tax?
right. It's about 10 to 12 million, I believe, is local option sales tax.
So a pretty significant reduction
Oh, absolutely.
in the,
Right. We can definitely provide that information for you as well in terms of the breakout, what makes up property taxes. That's more than just what you see. I mean, that's real estate, personal property. It does include lost collections as well.
Okay.
Since our lost collections are 100% rebated back to property tax.
And the percentage of lost collections is how much, Missy?
Percentage wise, it's close to a third of our property tax revenues.
All right.
I hope that was getting us some money.
I was checking the dream.
Depends on
We
which
can provide that information.
Can you remind me when the American Rescue Plan dollars have to be spent out?
So the Treasury is still debating some of that. The
Okay.
commitment of those funds at this point are through December of 2024,
Okay.
with the expectation of expenditure of December of 2026. So that's the part of getting final clarification from the Treasury in the sense of what means, what will be included as obligated and what means inclusion in terms of
Okay.
dollars spent. So just to sort of continue on with the transfers in hospitality tax, our combined cost allocation is 5.3. That's a slight adjustment of a 606,000, right at 2.6%. Capital lease proceeds, they're reflected at $9 million. That's the proceeds of our capital replacement program. It's called a lease, as Mr. Palin explained in one of our prior budget workshops. It's technically a loan, but it's a borrowing tool that we use for our capital replacement and technology, primarily rolling stock in the general fund. We also have reflected use of fund balance at $3 million, and again reflected use of American Rescue Plan at $2 million. And so just to wrap this up, since you probably couldn't hear me earlier when I was losing my voice, property transfers in account for about 14% of our total general fund budget.
Is that above or below whatever the standard is?
I don't know that I've seen a standard. It's a good question. We've hovered as low as maybe 10%. Of course, you want to manage, that number within something reasonable because those are oftentimes either considered one-time funds or funds that are not necessary. They're not the revenues that are funding your government. So, but certainly they are critical. We've seen as high in some places as high as 60%. So it really varies. In terms of general fund expenditures, the total general fund budget of the expenditure side, and of course, it's a balanced budget, so it's 170 million. That's an increase of 5.7 or 3.5% over the current year. Public safety makes up the majority of the departments in the general fund. The represented here is 46% because that represents the total budget, both operating budgets as well as transfer balance, such as debt service and capital lease payments. The majority of the capital lease is for police and fire equipment. So if you add those numbers in, they would exceed the 50%. Followed by general government and then of course public works and parks and recreation. Moving on with some highlights of our general fund, public safety, what's making up part of the increases for the public safety departments this year reflects an annualized police recruitment and retention annualized program pay plan, as well as annualized cost for a lot of the police technology that has been incorporated over the past couple of years, many of which was funded through grants and other one-time funds. So now that these represent an annualized cost in the general fund, those costs are exceeding $2.5 million for a variety of technology-based, mostly cloud solution services. So this would be reoccurring cost.
Yes, on the point, on the bullet, spot shot are included in that new technology.
Yes, sir, I should have listed that. You're exactly right. That would include shot spotter, body worn cameras, citywide cameras, as well as some other types of technology.
Is the citywide security camera upgrade, is that a one-time? Or is that, do we have that phased over?
No,
sometime?
it was initial phase-in for implementation, but the annualized cost, it is an annual. It's a subscription basically.
Okay.
It's a service. So yeah, so it is a reoccurring cost.
So is that service, is that fee gonna grow as the system grows? I guess obviously.
I think our contract and when it's make a drastic promise, I wouldn't do that, but I'm pretty confident it's a 5-year contract, so we'll see what happens in 5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
The projected costs though over those 5 years, I thought were fairly level.
it
Is
is.
that your question too?
Yeah, so subscription based, so many
Right.
points to, okay. Can we get an update? Will you send an update to us on that? About where we are in progress?
But also
Implementing that.
at the live version as well, so we actually have people monitoring. So that's another quiver for us, especially as we continue to try to boost up getting more sworn officers, and we got more tools in the toolbox to use to continue to make up for those differences. Don't think it's important. I think reflected in the budget further down too, you'll see where we're continuing to invest in rolling stock as well, and more vehicles as well.
Right. So we'll certainly can provide an update on that. I know it was slow for a little while with supply chain issues with the manufacturer, but I think they are on track and moving along. Otherwise, the fire department budget does also reflect their proposed pay plan that was discussed recently with city council. That reflects an adjustment to starting salaries for firefighters as well as implementation of a step plan. There's also, of course, adjustments to leave and consideration for use of part-time positions.
Missing in that budget, are we seeing, I think we'd like to see a little more detail as well around that to understand what we're doing for equipment. And, I know that we finally have gotten, but the city and the county moving forward on the second set of gear, but there also is some of the backup equipment and other things to make sure that we're addressing. And so I think it'd be helpful for us to know too what's a little more detail behind their budget to make sure some of those things are being addressed.
Yes, sir.
These are issues that we discussed over, the last year of just understanding that we're also, the pay is one thing, but the safety equipment and everything else is in how we're addressing that. I still would like for us to begin the discussion with the various university and even the state about contributing towards fire service. I know the Post and Courier posted an article over the weekend that Clemson University contracts with Greenville County. So there's a template there. So I think we need to have this discussion. How we put that into play, that may be square foot, versus, population.
Is that in the form of a service agreement with Clemson and Greenville County?
Mr. Mayor, is that, are we looking beyond the $1.5 million for gear? We're looking at other alternatives, other things we put in our.
Gear and making sure our backup equipment, the things like that, we've got enough, if it's fleet management or whatever,
Yeah,
to help
okay.
make sure, because I think the one thing as much as we all want to support a fire pay plan, which is very important, at the same time, we can't not have the safety in there. We got to keep not only our firefighters safe, but the public safe. So there's a little combination as we embark in this. I just want to make sure we're not leaving anything out.
In city council, you all over the past year have allocated several projects related to, in the general fund, especially last fall with the budget amendments, pretty hefty investment in capital projects for the general fund that included upgrades to police and fire facilities, as well as parks and recreation and some other activities. So we can bring those back as well. Moving on with some other general fund highlights. Public Works budget, of course, reflects the continuation of the beautification initiative, maintaining our entranceways and thoroughfares in the city. Parks and Recreation reflects continuation of programs along with some increased programming for senior activities, staff training, and the component replacement at site furnishings and bleachers, trash receptacles, things like that. As mentioned, there's been quite an investment in the past several months with regards to a variety of capital projects for our park upgrades, upfits, and renovations. Other areas to point out would be our human resources budget. They're focusing on recruitment and retention, employee engagement, which was also all 60, and then also broadening our professional development and training citywide. The clerk's budget reflects, I hear there's an election this fall, so she has decided to include that in her budget. Information technology increase, the IT budget reflects the city's Microsoft agreement for our enterprise license, and that would be for the entire enterprise, the entire city.
Is that going to include what we've been talking about looking into, which is for better engagement, not only with our constituents, but and how we work together? We looked at, forgot the name of it. I call it click bait or whatever.
Yes.
Click fix or something like that.
That's in the city clerk.
Click, and then he has what, midnight track or something?
And those would be in the city clerks. Homeless services doesn't reflect a change in this year's budget, in part because of their budget is partly supported with some of our grant and other funds. So at this point, we have not needed to make any adjustments to that budget for those ongoing operations. And then there you will see that there is a reserve for the city manager's proposed retention and recruitment strategy. She will be speaking to that momentarily, so we will get to that point before we wrap up.
Can you go back to the homeless service
Yes.
for a second? How much are we currently putting towards homeless services?
So the annual operations at this point is running about 1.8 million, which we're utilizing a combination of grant funds. We'll be using a combination of some opioid settlement funds.
Can I see a breakdown of where that money goes at some
Absolutely.
point? Thanks.
I was going to mention too, just to put it on the table, because I promised our clerk that I would, and I promised her that I would for a while, and I get that bringing up elections for you all, you have to, be educated and think about it, and it may not even be anything worth discussing. Many jurisdictions, and Erica, the reason why it makes sense to talk about during budget is because of the cost of elections. And right now, you all function with, the majority who wins. Many jurisdictions handle elections based off of plurality. And so I don't like to get into that, but I throw it on the table for y'all because Teresa, Erica, and I have debated on, when do you put that out there? Because there's always gonna be an election. You can always, I guess, figure out, is there a method that is more advantageous or not? I don't get into that part, but just from a cost perspective, then you have to do multiple runoffs and things like that with a majority vote is something to think about. So we just put that out there to y'all. It would take 2 votes for you to change to the plurality based voting mechanism.
Who around us, the Far Shaders does it, Lexington does it? Are we the only entity that doesn't do that?
Now, I think Michael, but maybe because that's the black, but everyone else is.
Probably something we ought to look at, and have a discussion. It obviously has to be set for it.
Right.
And you're talking about Richland County.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, one more slide on the general fund and then we will move on to other topics. So just pointing out our non-departmental, which would include our capital lease payment, for our existing capital lease as well as proposed capital lease for next year is running at 6.1 million. About one and a quarter of that is for the new proposed capital lease that we have in this current budget, but also some other capital lease sort of is retiring, so it helps to watch out some of the costs. Also included in the Richland is the funds that we contribute towards various Richland County services, which would include, and there's no change in the proposed budget at this time, but that includes the funding for the Albanese Detention Center.
Can we get some communication? Maybe Ms. Wilson, maybe you should reach out to Mr. Brown.
Yes.
With all the articles about all the upgrades and all the things needed there, let's make sure that we're not obligated. Because I don't think that we could get an unexpected bill. Right now, with all that we're investing currently within the city services.
Yes, sir.
I think it'd be wise for us to make sure that we're on target with our budgeted amount.
So we had requested a meeting and a tour that ACM Benjamin and Chief Holbrook were trying to organize, I think, because of everything you've been hearing about. And I know they're in the midst of dealing with some things. We haven't been able to secure that, but we'll stay on it and try to get an understanding of future billing as well.
Is that something we could join on before?
If you want to, I know.
We've talked about it so much, I think it's important for us to.
Yes, we can make that
Good.
happen. Yeah. We'll make sure the circumstances warrant when y'all can do that. Yes, ma'am.
We also include funding for the Fifth Circuit solicitor at $215,000. And then the public defender is here for $225,000. You may recall that is required by state and by proviso that we fund the public defender.
But not the solicitor.
But not the solicitor. That's correct. That has been a voluntary support. The debt service on our existing debt is right at 3.6 million. It's a slight reduction again as our debt service schedule calls and just satisfying some of that debt as we proceed. So that wraps up the general fund highlights. Do you have any questions about the general fund before we move on to the next section? Let's skip ahead and
reduction in the debt service. That's all.
let's skip ahead to the city manager's report, which is the order of your agenda, but
Get one to Mr. Duval. So I'm going to share with you all just a briefing note that I put together, my thoughts, really seeking some feedback from you. I do think it's time we turn the corner a bit. I'm sort of a student of, local government management. Recently, Mr. Brown and I had a conversation about how informing it is for me to also speak information, because I'm like a sponge, but also outside of governance and public sector, but private sector and other entities, and how everybody's doing things and managing people. And that's the biggest part of what we do, because as you know, in a municipality our size, where we have hovered around 2,300 employees, we're kind of now more around probably 2,100. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, an effective government, local government, functions best when its people, the human capital and infrastructure, are motivated, well-informed, valued, and feel empowered. And so I put some thoughts together that really drive my thoughts behind a goal to sort of reestablish ourselves that way with our human capital and our people. And I feel like if we go down this path with purpose, the outcome would be so beneficial, not just to our employees, but to our citizens and all of us. We would emphasize on some action items that I've listed in hopes that our organizational culture and performance would steadily improve and support employee retention and recruitment. As I was putting my thoughts to paper, I was really pleasantly surprised, informed by some research I did through the NLC, which a lot of you, particularly I know Dr. Buss is now in leadership, are familiar with. And I put a footnote at the bottom of the second page. I would really encourage you to go to their website and look at this action guide. They've got a few action guides now as part of their initiative for the future of cities. And there's an action guide entitled Building a Municipal Workforce for the Future. And many of the items in there, along with some private sector entities, it's really all the same stuff. Everybody's saying the same thing. And I think in the process of doing the work, we often don't get to do the analysis. So I appreciated the fact that they really put this analysis to paper in a very easy to read and insightful way. And so many of the things that they talked about have to do with competition now. And we're going to touch on some of that. Pam and Tanisa put together a few slides that go along with what I'm saying. But even just in our core Midlands area, everybody's obviously being affected by this because they're doing some pretty aggressive measures or proposing some aggressive measures to retain talent in particular, but also recruit. But I think my focus first and foremost is retaining our people and making sure that we're looking at more informed and creative retention and hiring practices. And what I mean by that, in government, a lot of times there are always certain boundaries that we worked within. And that doesn't necessarily, in a time like this, when the competition is high, afford us the opportunity to explore people who are in our midst, and they might not have a college degree, or they might not have checked every box on a certification, but they are absolutely well-intended, good employees, working hard. And if we could put some value into them and maybe help them attain certain things with programs we establish, we'd all be better for it. They'd be better for it, and we'd be better for it. So
that's very, very reflective of what we've been talking about in the last 14 months about investing internally. The discussions we had, with Denise and everyone else about how we're recruiting and how we're, we had all these job descriptions, but we were missing great talent because they didn't check the boxes.
Yes,
I'm looking at it differently, and I think investing, as we talked about, in creating that leadership program, I think is 100% behind.
That's right.
Making that move.
Along with that, we've been informed by the Evergreen market analysis on our pay, but pay, as you've said about fire and police, it's just one piece of the puzzle, but it is an important piece of the puzzle. And I asked Pam maybe to you know, we'll show in a minute a chart, like I said a minute ago, about even just in the Midlands, maybe what some of our counterparts are seeking to do. But we do have a proposal to bring us to market. And if minimum grades, if folks are brought to the new minimum grades, great. And if folks are already there, because as you have supported over the last year or so, you know, we've increased our livable wage and we've addressed some of the more urgent matters in the city, whether it was public works or parks and rec. And we've done it a little piecemeal. So we want to bring everybody who was left, to your point last meeting, Mr. Duvall, to the market analysis, minimum wage adjustment, or 3% if they're already at that. So that would be the request in this current budget, where you'll see a reserve line that has 2 million in the general fund. It's really probably 3 million when you incorporate across all funds to adjust to get us right there. And then my additional ask that I'm putting on the table is to really maintain that $3 million reserve going forward. Not unlike what we described with police and fire, not proposing a step pay plan, but I think for our employees to know that each year there's a reserve there to do something. If it's a COLA, fine. But what I'd love to see it be, with what I'm about to describe, with a very intense focus on the program of evaluation, but a merit system that we have a 3% reserve there, because it's accountability on both sides, right? So if we put these things in place, then hopefully our employees will feel the value for us putting in place, but their profile by the end of the year ought to reflect what we've asked them to do. By investing in them, I really want to see the return. And I think there's been some discussion about our evaluation system. So that would place us implementing the market adjustments in August, September of this year with this current budget, or with this proposed budget, FY 23-24. And if you maintain that reserve for the next fiscal year, then we would use this fiscal year we're about to go into to enact this new, more robust evaluation system. Everybody's falls in line with that. And then by the end of FY 23-24, we would evaluate with these new profiles, and then hopefully be able to implement a merit adjustment in next August, September of 24, 25. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like establishing a baseline and then trying to maintain it based off a new system. And I'll go through that in a minute.
Ms. Wilson, let me ask. I hear this and it looks well, and of course I buy into this. How does this perhaps minimize the negativity that evolves around 2,300? I mean, there's some negative chatter out there. Is this a part of empowering and making folk valued employees? Is this a part of that?
I think it's all about that for me.
That's my sense.
Yes, sir. I was.
And the reason I ask that is that you get a whole lot of negative chatter from persons who are city employees. How do you value them, make them feel a sense of worth? Is it financial, or is it more reflective of who that person is and how we might impact that person? And how do we, and I think this document sort of gives us some headway into making this thing happen holistically. That's my sense.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that it's incumbent upon me and the assistant city managers. I mean, we are like head down all the time,
That's
you know, doing the work. And I think what you will probably see, and I've had this discussion with them, is, you know, in a high performance organization, the manager and the assistants, but I lean into them already so much, but I gotta be like more up here. I gotta touch our employees a little bit more. I think you all have approved, I am so excited. I'm like, how are we gonna get all these projects done? I mean, there's a lot of work that you all have authorized, project-wise, infrastructure-wise. And I looked at my own evaluations over the years. I tend to get very high marks on the work that we're doing. We're doing the work. But in the process of doing the work, I mean, I'm even analyzing myself. Like, I need to get neck deep and spend the time with our employees in the field. They have great ideas, some of them, that I implement. If they have ideas about efficiencies, I mean, maybe we won't do everything, but just that engagement to see that they may be suggesting things, they're doing the work. I mean, they may have some ideas we hadn't thought about that we could do things differently. They ought to get a check mark, though, for even sharing that. And I don't know right now, I don't sense right now that we've established something that maybe encourages that. And that's what I want. I just want to change the culture, help people feel empowered, engaged, and give them points for that. It ought not be a subjective thing. If you're doing that, I want to establish this tool. We have the capabilities. We have it maximized. Its cornerstone is our platform for evaluations. We've been doing evaluations. Don't get me wrong. I have to, the staff, Denise and Pam, probably get a little jittery because they don't like it to seem like we haven't been evaluating people. We have on core values, and managers go through and answer the questions, but is it interactive? Is it engaging? Do employees feel like they've been evaluated on a certain level, and or that if they're asking for more, or if they need certain certifications, trainings, do we have a program in place that makes it very easy and accessible for them to get what they need?
I will tell you, a year ago, I did that. I went to met with all, which I'm going to do again this year. I wish we could do it more. I will tell you, just the conversations that you get, all right, yeah, pay, insurance, things are in there, but it was more about, did you realize that you did this, that it prohibits me from doing this? And if we did this, we could do it more efficiently, because those are the folks at the end of the day, they want to provide good customer service. They want to be able to do their job without the hindrances. And sometimes I think it's very important that we do more of it, and they need to see more of us having that conversation with them, because it makes a difference, because they are the backbone for us. 100%.
100%.
And of course, when that happens here, it metastasizes every community we go into. Each one of us go into.
Yeah.
We hear things.
Yeah. I know it's supposed to ride with you, but we got to get that ride in to,
Yes, ma'am. We
talk
got
to the
to do
community.
that.
Yes.
It has to be a collaborative. It has to be some collaboration with the top folk and with the 2,300 employees.
Strong foundation from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Absolutely.
You got to include them in
that community. In that community, if you've got 2,300, and I say this facetiously, if you got 2,300 persons who are extremely satisfied and we're doing the right things, how does that spill over into the 4 districts, or better yet, into all of our areas?
Yes.
How do we make that approachable?
Yeah.
We go into areas, and what we see at community meetings is a lot of complaining about what we aren't doing. And I think in order to hear some of that stuff that we aren't doing, what about some of those things that we are doing? And we try to say that as much as we can to communities without saying any untruths about anything. But of course, making this collaborative up here to down here and having it to metastasize throughout the city. And I think that's the way we do it. Now, how do we do that? And I think we do that in a very comprehensive way, because we meet with these folk every month. We meet with these folk every month. And sometimes the complaints are the same.
Mhm.
And we try to answer those things, try to get those things. But a happy employee makes for a community that understands and senses that the city is on their side.
Yes, sir. I mean, the executive summary is touching of the NLC action guide says investing in a skilled workforce can lead to greater efficiencies, lower costs, and greater value for taxpayers. I think that's hitting exactly on what you're saying.
So I have a
Go ahead, talk about it.
couple of things that I wanted to suggest as we think about this. One is oftentimes the power structures make it difficult for people to be honest, and that's not city specific, that's any entity you go to. It's intimidating to talk to someone like you, as someone who might be brand new to the city. And so something that I've seen that's been very helpful is one of those workforce culture surveys that allow people to provide feedback anonymously about things that they'd like to see change or improve. And it's in written format, so they don't have to feel like they have to be prepared to give you all of this in a one-on-one setting. And I've seen that be done in nonprofits and in larger kind of corporations, and it really provides valuable insight in a way that's easy to access. And it could be through SurveyMonkey or whatever survey tool. And then the other thing I'd suggest, I like that you said that, you want to have more touch points with staff. Allowing people to do peer sharing without their managers present, I think is especially important as well. Because that's where you really start to get to the meat of the conversation about things that may not come up in those formal evaluation settings, but certainly would come up in some of those peer sharing, and can maybe bubble up to some good recommendations as well. And then having some sort of quarterly kind of open, coffee with the city manager where it's not a required mandatory thing, but the option is there for you to be able to come to City Hall and come and sit down with you. I think that will also help kind of shift the idea that, you are accessible to people other than maybe the management team.
Right.
So-
I love all of that. Very helpful.
Go ahead.
So talk to me about, once this is in place and you can really track milestones and opportunities presented to employees. What about employees don't meet the expectations? Does that mean you don't get a pay bump
Right.
annually?
So typically, when we have done evaluations in the past, in many years past, it was based off the annual anniversary date of the employee. Then we more recently moved to a fall timeframe where all evaluations are due in around September.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been the years it was funded, a merit-based system up to 3%, which is really essentially what we're still proposing. The difference here is that I'm hoping we can, maintain that. Like we're having this conversation, which I really appreciate, because there have been years past where it's a hard conversation to even have, maybe with policymakers. It's not because you didn't want to do it or they didn't want to do it. It's, budgets have been tight. The budgets are still tight. And at some point you gotta put in place for people to know it and have the expectation that if I perform and I'm being invested in and I perform, there's the potential for me to make up to 3% of merit increase. I think because there's been so much, some years we had it, some years we didn't, and we haven't done these other things we're talking about. I don't know that employees have come to expect anything one way or the other. But even with all this, if you're not performing it, the tool is going to be developed in a way that it's pretty. I'll be able to look at it myself and tell if you're doing all the things we're asking you to do and providing opportunities for you to do, and you're getting certain points. I mean, I want it to be visual. I just got a lot of thoughts in my head, like green lights for, measures simple for our folks in the field to go in and see and appreciate their progress and what they're doing.
Yeah.
If you do the recurring reserve, would you all consider shifting to doing the timeline to the fiscal year for performance? Because I feel like that would align better with.
And this does that.
Okay.
So the thought was, Dr. Bustles, that we introduce it, we get the baseline done of the market adjustment. That's funded in the budget we're proposing to you. And we would implement that baseline in August or September for everybody. And then we immediately start with the new evaluation tool for this fiscal year. So by June of this fiscal year coming up, they would be evaluated. And then we would implement the merit up to 3% for those that qualify
From the new budget. Okay.
in August or September of the next fiscal year. So it's almost like people would now get on a schedule of the fiscal year in anticipation of a merit. Now that says to us in the next budget cycle, we're gonna be needing to budget that reserve again.
But I think where we are too, we're at 2,100 from 2,500. And I'll be honest with you, I think we're running more efficiently, more effectively. We get more positive comments. We're investing with training, technology, giving employees autonomy to do their job. I think we got a different workforce today, in my opinion.
Sure.
Of what it is. And also, I think, because we're budgeting for what we need, not what we want at this point, it's going to give us that ability to fund that. And it shouldn't be a stretch and a reach. It should fit into what we've been doing.
So what we're talking about in terms of evaluation, are we talking about another tier in terms of accountability?
I think you could look at it that way. Yes, sir.
All right, is it more stringent or that level of accountability as it relates to if a person is not doing his or her job? What other measures do we assume or take as it relates to accountability?
Well, I think that if that is the case, that a manager feels
yeah.
that way or supervisor, some of the things that we haven't, I guess, had in our toolbox is to say, have you sent employee A to supervisory training or whatever? That maybe Pam, you should flip to those slides now, but Denise and Pam have been working on a training and professional development program. And I want that to be like our program so that we have some tools in our toolbox for times like that. So my goal would be that if somebody really wants to improve upon any deficiencies he or she may have, we have some things that are here for them to be able to do that. They probably have always been able to look towards external resources, but we're trying to put an actual program in place that it's here for them. And it really shouldn't be an excuse for anyone not to be able to do certain things, to check certain boxes, because we're investing in them if they take the opportunity to do it.
So it's now a progression of steps, 1, 2, 3, as opposed to one step being.
I think more opportunities.
All right.
More opportunities. And I didn't even touch on the mental health and well-being aspect. We're looking at some applications that could be voluntary for people to ensure that their mental health and well-being is top of mind as well.
Okay. So before we move on, I just want to say a couple of things, and some of them tie back to what Daniel said. So first of all, I'm really glad we're having this discussion. Secondly, it's very similar to what we have to do in the business world. Okay, so because this is just the way life is. So in my mind, as the CEO of the city, in my role at my company, I think the most important thing that you can do is establish the structure and the culture of the city. That's really what's important as you go down to all this 2,100 people, because they all represent the city.
Yes.
And as a representative of the city, we want them to be proud of what they do. We want them to understand that we support them. Yes. And the best employee is the one you already have.
That's right.
But more to it than that. It's reasonable as time goes on, if we do the right things, it's reasonable that we would have less people, more efficient, more able to do more things, and you have less people making more money. And that's really the way the world is going now. So as a city, I think we should look at the structure, the culture, but also how we invest in systems and technology to make people more valuable to themselves and to the city. And by doing that, you also improve the quality of life of that employee because they're able to do things, you know, that are less stressful and also more ease factor of how they're able to do their job.
Right. That's exactly right.
So and as an aside, one of the things that we do at our company is we've established certain metrics that we think are super important to the viability of the company, but also the viability of our employees. So we track revenue per production hour. It's a very important stat for us as a company is the amount of product we can make per production hour in the facility. We also track revenue per employee. We track multiple different metrics that tell us, you know, and it tells us how we're performing, but it also oftentimes highlights things that are non-performing areas of the company that we can then look at and try to figure out how we can better position ourselves. But all that's about the value for the employee, you know, so and then it does trickle down. So I applaud us for having this conversation. I think it's important that this be a super topic for us going forward, because this is who we are. And again, it goes back to, we talked about marketing, messaging. The problem is marketing messaging run out when you can't back it up. So at the end of the day, you back it up with what who you are in the core of the city. And that's what every employee should understand and figure out, that how they represent the city in everything they do.
Absolutely. And that's the story.
Well
I think.
said.
That's the story that we don't tell. I've been on this trail a long time. And one of the things that I have sort of admonished by simply saying, we don't tell our story, nor do we evaluatively look at folk for the gifts that they bring to the table.
Which makes them want to tell a story.
You're absolutely
They're telling it, but they're living it. And it's easy to tell a story when you live it.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely
You
right.
believe it. It's even easier to tell a story when you believe it.
When you believe it, and see, that's the part, I think, this is what you're getting at, I think.
Yes.
I think underneath all of that is believing the story.
Yeah.
And believing it in such a way that you can effectively tell your story. We don't do a good job with that. I mean, we don't. And I think this document gives us the impetus to move forward in not only creating the tiers that are needed to effectively look at 2,100, 2,300 employees and looking at them in a way where the best, I mean, you're actually saying the best is yet to come.
Exactly.
And I think that really gives us an opportunity to not only effectively do this, but to effectively engage ourselves in telling a story that is positive.
And I think we weave your strategic outcomes that you all have identified, those priority, the big 6 or 7. You know, it's so easy. Everything we do falls in one of those outcomes that y'all identified. And I want that to be a part of the tool. But I mean, you all are saying it better than I ever could. And it's what I've been talking to the senior team about. Like, we
You
have
started the conversation and it's good.
well, it was time. It was probably past.
Well, you know, one of the interesting, and I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson.
That's okay.
One of the interesting things that I think the mayor has involved himself in is that you try to engage folk where they are and not particularly where we think they ought to be. And that's a difference. That's a difference in terms of engaging folk in a way that looks at positive things, as opposed to saying our city, this is a great city. It's doing well. We're doing well with fewer people. And that's the story. And we don't tell that story. And I want to say this to you, Mayor. Because, and I'm just not throwing out kudos today, but, I think that's what you do in every environment that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of with you, is that you try to say, this is what our city is all about. And if our city is growing, if our city is going to be a safe city, it's got to be a clean city, and it's got to have other things that sort of embraces itself. So
That's because Daniel's selling.
yeah, he's selling. He's a good seller.
What you gotta do is, the rest of us gotta have to back him up with something other than selling.
Peter, you're absolutely right, man. Cause you can't do it by yourself. None of us can do it by ourselves, but we can do it collectively and make this city something that is pleasant and safe, and the environment is of such where folk want to come to our city because it embraces a whole sense of hospitality and those sort of things. So this document for me represents not the beginning, but it certainly represents an ongoing kind of conversation that we need to have and to put those things into place that's going to be good for the city of ours.
Yes,
And I think that goes back to what we and I think our whole point is that we are Columbia, South Carolina. And we have the opportunity and we control it, and we need to tell our story, as we've said 1,000 times, not just internally, but externally. And this is part of it. I mean, there's just no reason why we shouldn't be positive about today or the future. Absolutely should.
so much potential.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
It is. Well, I've learned in doing this when I can feel some support, so I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. I would like, I'm gonna.
Talk about the timing of the mechanism.
Yes, so, again, we are asking for the reserve of 3 million across all funds in this proposed budget, and then maintaining
And that's
that
reflected
going
in what we've
forward.
seen?
It is,
Okay.
it is reflected in what you've seen. And, Pam, if you wanted to just advance to talk, broadly, you and Denise, about the program, did you have any things you wanted to add about that? So I'll let you talk about it. If you can, I know your throat's been bothering you. You want me to do it? Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Pam. Okay. But basically, it's right here. So Pam, Denise, and I over the last several months have met with some external consultants, experts in their field, and I feel like they can complement a very capable human resources director and her team. I do intend to lean into Denise about hiring an internal engagement officer that this state can work with me, and this is what we focus on every day to build that value and implement these things. But the program, the courses and the trainings will focus on core leadership competencies, coaching, the 5 choices to extraordinary productivity and ethical leadership. But again, we'll have several subject matter experts that we want to engage to pull off these courses, training, certifications, speaker series across the city to achieve the benchmarks, so that, to you all's point, there's really no reason that an employee can't feel the value if they take advantage of what we're trying to put in front of them.
And this will serve 2 purposes. Number one, the people that want to be here will get better, and the people that don't want to be here will.
It'll fall off. I mean, and that's
you know, and
the
sometimes
truth.
it's we get hung up sometimes as senior management. Oh man, so and so quit. Well, you know, I'm at year 31, and
Yeah.
of everybody that eventually quit, they all quit for the same reason.
Yeah.
Which is they didn't believe in the culture of the business.
And you touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'll just go ahead and say it, because a part of this budget process for us too, But you all encouraged us to start, and we looked really hard at vacancies. The pencils were continued to be sharpened with this budget from a staffing perspective. You know, if a position for me has been vacant for over a year, I ask some very tough questions, and then I ask our very senior leaders, so who's been doing that work? Because clearly the work's been getting done, right?
Yeah.
So if it has, and if that person
Good question.
who has, or persons who are still with us and have leaned into getting that work done, what have we said to them to bring value to them? To your point about, you then really over time, organically, you end up with people making more money because they ought to feel the value for what they have embraced and are doing. And you don't fill that position, but you build up somebody who's equipped to do it. But what we found in that is some of those other creative hiring things need to be addressed, where we take the boundaries off, because Sally may not have had her degree in blah, 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 but she was still doing it and she was asking for more. So does that mean we don't advance her? Yeah, all day long.
And I think adding to that, though, I think this is what that exercise of going through and evaluating that, because that was always the equity that people used to try to do other things. But I think since we collectively have said we want to invest in the city, I think it's easier for people to realize that that structure benefits everybody much, much better in the long run than hiding positions to use as currency, which seemed to be the trend. And then I think with, you know, the management consultant looking at the structure, it's going to fall right in line with this, because I think it's going to help you tool out how to elevate those folks.
Sure. And those interviews, I think we were down to 3 finalists, and those interviews are this week, Pam indicated. So that's moving along as well. Probably the only thing I didn't touch upon that's in here is we are still finding that, you know, alternate and flexible schedules for people are very appealing, and has been something we compete with. So we're going to look at that. It's not appropriate across the board. I don't think I ever, as a manager, would suggest we could ever be all remote. I mean, we exhibited during the pandemic. There's a way to do it where appropriate. And so those are things we want to formalize where appropriate.
90%
hybrid
folks are in the people business,
Yeah,
so they have
yeah.
to be involved. But I
Yeah.
do agree with you, the hybrid, the flexibility for certain positions, but also even the flexible work schedule. So I think there's a very large workforce out there of some very strong candidates
Yeah.
that who might probably rather work different hours so
Yeah.
that they can have that balance with the needs of
Yeah.
their family. I'd rather have somebody work 6 hours a day that's than somebody being there 10 hours a day that's not producing.
You know, Mary, you sat in on these interviews for certain things, and what people now are, and I don't blame them. I need to figure out how to be more like that. The work-life balance is a real thing, and it goes to our mental health, it goes to our well-being, and people are demanding it. I mean, more than ever, they speak up and ask for it. So those are the main points. Let's see.
I think this is
I think
great.
that was.
Wilson, did we hit at the timeline?
Yes, sir. All I would really need for you want to do is, embrace that reserve of 3 million to get us to baseline with the market adjustments to start out with in this upcoming fiscal year. And then we'll maintain that to fund the merit adjustments
I would
going
say
forward.
that's a wink and a nod from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, plus Miss Herbert. She's winking. I can see her.
Oh,
there on the screen.
is she winking? Okay, that sounds
Stuff like that.
She good.
She's got a great poker face.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And, it's like I said, not just locally, we had a chart. We don't have to get into that, but everyone's doing something. So you aren't by yourselves. And nationally, from the League of Cities Action Guide really reiterates what direction we need it to go. So I appreciate you.
I also think this would be we could develop a really good intern project out of all this.
You're right. We had an
Really
amazing
Yeah.
interview yesterday with an intern. I
Fantastic.
look forward to introducing you to. Well, thank you. So we will keep on. Do y'all need a break? We've got a little bit more. Okay, thank you so
The
much.
only thing that I would say, is I like this. I think it's a good segue into what we want to do.
Yes, sir.
I guess my whole emphasis is timeline.
Mhm.
If we look at the money,
Mhm.
we can squirrel the money, pigeonhole the money.
Mhm.
But what about timeline? How do we actualize these things other than the money now?
Right.
How do we actualize these things?
So I'll be leaning into Denise and Pam, and we're pretty much at a point to pull the trigger on the program as I've outlined it. We're gonna have to do some work internally with our Cornerstone platform
Okay,
to set up the evaluation tool to be aligned with this strategy. But it starts with the new fiscal year. So in July, we're gonna start educating our employees.
People I was talking about at the last meeting,
Mhm.
August and September.
For the market adjustment, right? That would be implemented.
this idea.
I love it to be August. We put August, September, because just technology wise, we've gotta
Yeah.
implement.
And August
Yeah.
and September will fit next year
Correct.
into your evaluation.
That's correct. Y'all ready? All right, well, that's on.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson. This is, just sort of wrapping up from prior conversations with regards to a couple of changes that we have brought to you with regards to primarily special event fees, and then false alarm fee funds. So I'm gonna touch first on, special events, as we talked about over the past two council meetings, our previous council budget workshop, in terms of our special events and how we currently do not charge for a variety of city services provided for special events that take place on public property, and often in services, along with some of our permit fees for those associated. So what we have done is taking city council feedback from our last discussion on fees. And staff has put together an updated recommendation we would like to present, which include the first information is we've broken it down into permit fees and then service fees. So the first is looking at our special event permits. And we've broken it down into current categories, major festival events. Often that will include the service of alcohol, include outdoor entertainment, and or more than likely the event is generating a revenue for that organization that is hosting the event. And then may or may not include the closing of a road. Currently, that fee for a permit is $5. The proposed fee is $100 for that benefit. And then, of course, a 90 days timeline for submission of that permit. That often involves if you recall, as you all see coming to you, an event requires or a request for service of alcoholic beverages. Those events come to city council by way of resolution. So of course, this timeline incorporates the ability to get that item on city council's agenda. Of course, the coordination with police department and other entities and making sure that the event has the right plans in place. And other activities that have to, a lot of coordination has to occur, starting with the police department.
I think everything should have, and I'm not for waiving the fee, on anything. And I think people have got to have some skin and some money in it, because I've been to too many public gatherings lately where there's no charge. And I gotta tell you, I watch our staff have to go back and clean up behind all these folks. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Everybody ought to be involved, especially when it's a community event. Us for trash removal, for delivery of everything. I mean, these are minimal fees for that, but it's the point that people are invested and they look at things differently. And I just think you gotta have it. I know there was some concern from some neighborhoods about it, but they're in the same boat as that. I've been to too many neighborhood cleanups. Nobody from the neighborhoods there, and it's everybody in. So, I mean, I just think that you gotta be invested like.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Excuse me.
So you recommend
Next.
just keeping the fee and
I
removing
think,
the discretion?
yeah.
Is the 90 day what it is now? Is that essentially what it is now? Yes.
So one of the things, I'm gonna go back, and again, I'm 100% for this. I want to go back though and have the people that work for me look at road closure fees. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm, and if I'm wrong, I'll be the first. I mean, a lot of times we have to spend $2,000 to close a road in places. I mean, I'm talking about, for the day and not $50. So, I want to look into this. I'm sure I send an email out and I'll send you 5 real life feedbacks, but I think we should charge a lot more for closing the road. I'm not talking about some neighborhood, I'm not talking about Shirley Street. I'm talking about the thing we just had on Main Street. That's a big quality of life issue for everybody in the city. Okay. And it's expensive and we should charge market rate, stuff like that. And
Most of this project are
better than zero, but $50 ain't nothing. And it's almost a pain. So I'm gonna write down $2,000. That's what I think the average is.
Focused on the small events. What you're saying is you want to look at
Yeah,
the
big stuff.
schedule for the big stuff.
For the big stuff.
Crane-
Yeah, right.
crane
When you have a
location.
crane in a lane closure, it's expensive for the city. It's really expensive. That's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about some art festival
So
on
we need to
Shirley
make a
Street.
schedule. It
Yeah.
sounds like what we really need to do is you need to have a tier, because I think there's a big difference between a 6-hour event.
Yeah, right.
And
That's
what,
6 months.
and then, yeah,
That's right.
and then a 30-day closure and how that affects.
I mean, we if we have a high-rise sign, I mean, it's not going up in 2 minutes.
Right.
And it costs money to do this and everybody knows there's a cost of doing business. So yes, I want to make sure I'm clear. I'm segregating out the neighborhood, picnic
We need to
from
clear-
the
From the major roads.
from a major road.
So we need like a tier system
Yeah,
for.
the commercial versus residential. It's a commercial issue. And I'm telling you, it's expensive out there.
So that's where, and I think Mr. Brown's speaking to, road closures specifically related to something that's gonna disrupt businesses, something's
Yeah.
gonna be there for multiple days. That's a road closure, but right now what's been proposed is $50
Yeah.
per day,
Oh.
$25 per day if it's just a lane closure. What we hear you're saying is
It's
is
not.
that should be more, that's
No,
obviously related to some kind of construction or something else. That's not an event that's closing.
We need
down
to see
today.
what all of that, lane closure, all of that stuff, what that is being charged across. I mean, the state charges a fee. I imagine all the other counties for construction.
Yeah, it's rough out there in the real world. I'll get you at least a handful of real life
Like
situations,
tomorrow?
within the next 24 hours. yes.
Okay, thank
24
you.
hours.
Because we wanted to, all of these, we'll talk about this too in a minute, but we're advertising on the 18th. We're sending it to be advertised on the 18th, so we need to make these adjustments quickly.
I might get it by the end of this meeting if it keeps lasting. So
The clerk is actually up that
So,
7.
but my question from a
Oh.
legal procedure,
The paper is.
could we can go back and have another public hearing, advertise and do this, so if you
Do you
can't make
wanna
it by tomorrow.
Leave this off. Leave these.
Go
two
back
off.
and I think you have a full schedule,
Right,
Okay.
there's and this is.
because
just
we're
for the
gonna have to go back
permits.
and adjust it anyway if we do it quickly now,
Mhm,
So this may be something we wanna go back and do separately.
okay. If we can't get it tidied up, we will. That's a good point.
So it'd be advertised at these rates for public hearing and first reading and then.
Or I think what the mayor's saying is don't advertise.
Don't
Just take the road closure off.
Just
Let's
about
come up with the
30.
adequate schedule and we'll advertise it.
So I
Once
just
we
pulled
have
up
that.
something for Greensboro. They tier it based on major thoroughfares by lane. And it's $70 per day per lane. So that adds up pretty quickly if it's a 2-lane road that you're closing, right? And then, of course, they have other city streets that are $25 a day, and in parentheses, it says non-peak / neighborhood.
Sure.
So I think we
Yeah,
should do
neighborhood,
something
right.
like that, yeah.
So not all roads are created equal.
Yeah, agreed.
Correct. We have highways, we have all sorts of things.
And that's a true statement based on pothole repair.
Right, and sometimes the city may be the ones that's closing off the roads too.
The 60 days prior to a closing for a snow cone social in a neighborhood. Is that, I mean, can we tighten that up a little? Calling 2 months ahead seems like a lot. And I know that there's different degrees of neighborhood gatherings, obviously. But you know,
30 days seems more reasonable. Or,
yeah, I think 30 days would be good.
So this would be the ones that do not include the service of alcohol.
Right, correct.
like Johnny's birthday party or
Right. A
a
neighborhood
neighborhood
block
block
party.
party.
Just give us a 30-day heads up. You gotta, okay.
That's fine.
So holding on road closures with the others, adjusting neighborhood gatherings to 30 days.
All right.
All right, moving on to city special event fees for city services. This is where this gets a little bit more into the à la carte discussion that we talked about too. So police and fire marshals are the off-duty officers. We've included them here. They're currently they are $35 per hour per officer. And then the proposed rate is $45 per hour per officer. The $35 rate has been in existence for at least 10 years or more. There is a minimum of 3 hours for every officer that is brought to an event. Most of the events, the number of officers is decided by the police department, but there are occasions where someone may request the service of a police officer at their private event. So that's to be determined.
That's sworn officers. I mean, so if off-duty code enforcement, still at the $45?
Code enforcement, right?
Why not 50?
If it doesn't require.
No, that's what I wanna know. I'm like, why not just
Yeah.
50?
Yeah.
See, let me ask you a question. Why not, you got 35, and then you got 45, why not 50? I mean, what? Why not 50?
Staff is proposing it at rates that seem, reasonable with
Yeah,
your.
it's 45 reasonable. I mean, we're talking about a police officer at $45 an hour.
I asked the major and the chief multiple times, are you going to 50? They landed on 45. So I mean, going to 50 was in the atmosphere for me. They landed on 45. Is there a rhyme or reason to 45 versus 50?
That are surrounding communities.
We looked at surrounding, communities. There is,
My chief.
Does it vary, chief?
Crisis.
Or could it vary?
sir,
Could it vary from 45 to 50 based on surrounding?
I think the highest we found in the Midlands was 55. Ms. Wilson is correct. 50 is also between 45 and 50 is kind of the market here. We did say 45. If we're looking a couple of chess moves ahead, I mean, certainly 50 is very, very competitive.
We're out,
I will say, one of the things that we do see now is, there are certain, vendors that ask for police officers, but because of what they're asking, they pay a premium. So during holiday season, we'll see, like Walmart's a good example. I think they oftentimes pay $75 an hour because they have trouble getting, that security position staff.
Chief, is that in addition to $75, say, for Walmart? And if we do 45, is that 45 included in what Walmart would normally give, or is that all?
Just directly cut to the officer,
right.
correct?
It's what now?
They would be billed the 40, whatever rate we decide, whether it's the big box vendor or a neighborhood.
We stay within.
organizer, or
right.
That's the rate across the board, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Or an event organizer.
These payments go straight to the office.
Mhm.
I just think that since we're taking this leap and this will be rates that people will have to get used to for a while, and we want to stay as close to market. I don't think a $5 difference is that big of a deal. I think we should move to 50, especially when there's people that are 55 and above. I also think about some of the junior officers that this could be an opportunity for them to make some extra dollars, so.
The only other thing I bring you all's attention to at the bottom, there is an administration fee that we're introducing. So we were trying to keep all of that in mind, but I'm with you. I mean, administration fee notwithstanding, I wasn't opposed to the 50, but that is the nuance as well. The administration fee is to help for the third party vendor, a part of that percentage, 10% of it is what they would charge us to administer these costs. 10% of the invoice and 2% would be part of our fee.
$61 an hour.
If you include the 12%.
But I think what you're trying to do though is you're trying to support the value of the police officers.
Correct.
In my mind, what you're doing is this is a little bit of changing
Let's
the
add it.
free mentality.
The mindset.
The mindset. So part of this is establishing a value.
percent is
Off the total invoice, no
Yes.
matter what it is. The officer would always get 45 or 50 per hour.
It's added on top of it.
Yeah, it's added on top of whatever. So in a hypothetical, when we ran some events, some of y'all's traditional events that you get for approval to just show what it's gonna be. But if it's an event where all they need are officers, then it'll be 12% added. If it's an event where they need officers and street sweeping and an electric box, all of that's totaled up on the invoice, and then 12% is added.
What you saying?
Many of those rates
I go with
of our partner agencies, they use a third-party solution too, so they have administrative fees attached to.
I think we have to party
Mm.
solution
Should be
for the
allowed,
efficiency and effectiveness of what just the interaction with the public, for that.
We'll still have our internal, that's something, again, we're gonna be looking at, does it still land in CPD? Are we gonna have a separate special events office? Still always gonna need that function where those individuals work with the third party vendor to help an event organizer come up with their total invoice, but they will actually administer the charges being made and whatever percentage comes back from an administrative standpoint.
Chief, let me ask you something. I support the $50. Let's say the organizer, we don't have enough of the CPD team available. Is it open for sheriff's deputies, maybe Lexington County deputies to come and work these events?
We open that up now.
Okay, fantastic.
And the other thing that occurs with the vendor, let's say, use the Walmart as the example, this is an app the officers go into and see what's available. They're not getting any takers.
Mm-hmm.
They go back to the vendor and say, hey, we have no interest, thus far. Do you want to increase your hourly rate? Then they repost it with an hourly rate until if that vendor chooses to do so, they can keep raising that.
They get matched, right?
It's an auction for.
It really is.
So is the
Babysit.
consensus 50?
I would support them.
Yeah.
I support
And of course, that would be for the fire, keep it consistent.
Right.
for-
I support that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on, the other rates that are being proposed, and of course, police and fire marshals, those services are currently being paid at that lower rate. So these would be entirely new fees that we would be charging for a variety of services. The complete majority of these costs come in by request of the police department receiving a request for a special duty or a parade permit, what's now a parade permit. Moving on to some others. So these other costs are associated with the other city departments that provide services. And of course, it is dependent upon whether or not the service is being provided, of course. Roll carts are proposed at $20 per cart. That would include delivery and pickup from the site.
That includes disposal.
That does include disposal. We should also clarify that's right. It's pickup and disposal. Right. public works employee, if sometimes an event may ask for a public works employee to be on site, helping to empty out carts during their event. For that employee to be on site is $32 per hour.
That includes stage deliveries? I'm sorry to interrupt.
So, I'll come back to that one. Public works barricades, we have looked at other communities. And, Mr. Anderson has, proposed in here $10 per barricade for up to 50 barricades, and that's per barricade. It takes 2 trucks to deliver barricades. Regardless of how many there are, so it takes at least 2 trucks to deliver barricades. So it's it's $10 per barricade for up to the first 50, and then after that, you get a volume discount of $7.50 per barricade.
Look at that deal. That's a steal.
That explains, that's right.
The steel should be barricaded in.
So it includes delivery and pickup from the event. And again, the number of barricades is based on the number of the police department determines is needed for appropriate road closures and so forth. And there are times when an organization will request just barricades. The street sweeping is $26 an hour. That includes, of course, the street sweeper and equipment. Public works blower operator, that's $10 per hour per employee.
What is that?
That is an employee actually with
It's not
a.
even minimum. I mean.
That's not even minimum wage, yeah.
I mean, minimum's $15 an hour. Why
Are
would
we doing
we
10?
charge less?
Put some machinery,
It gives me
Maintenance.
value when y'all ask the same questions that I ask the staff.
$22.
I do
$22.
support what their recommendations are, but I ask the same
That
thing
doesn't
there.
make sense.
Man,
Why would we lose money on that?
$10 an hour.
Robert, what's,
It's like we're
what's your,
You got the machine. At least it's better than 10. Robert, you know, this.
Robert's, look at him, he's just a nice guy.
He-
Robert.
Wait,
Robert needs to realize-
talk,
Open.
he's a
Show us your mean face, Robert.
cookie, so I don't know.
From my understanding, there's all of the fees is that we were not trying to collect 100% of the fees, we're just trying to offset some of our costs.
That's not offsetting your cost.
If we need to go back and charge 100% of the fees, you know, garbage truck driver, or garbage truck itself is probably $125 an hour just to operate. So, you know, that's what we
Yeah,
tried
but
to do.
lower at $10, you're paying that guy more than
And the
$10.
guy 14.50 plus benefits.
Right.
So you gotta charge $20 an hour for
Yeah.
somebody to do that work.
Yeah.
That's simple
I
math
like
there.
this crowd right here, so I love it.
Do you get calls for street sweeping using your big machine?
So we get several calls a
When they
year
work.
to include Elmwood Turf Homes, the holiday parade of homes in Shandon during the winter. So we get special calls to sweep streets during the year
I promise you,
Outside of your normal.
outside of our normal streets.
I would say, I promise you, charge market value, you're gonna get less calls. That's all I can tell you. But, you know, this is the whole concept that, you know, free begets more free, which is more free, which is more free. But if you make people say,
True.
do you want a street sweep for $125? No. Okay, great.
And I will make a comment from the earlier about blocking roads. I do know that the detour plan for the bridge dinner is about $2,500.
Yeah, I believe it.
So
Robert, any more adjustments before you send it out? Okay. All right.
I also think you gotta put a note on this, that street sweeping is for folks who are asking for something above the normal.
These are requested, yes. These
Yeah,
are
I just think you
requested.
gotta be clear about that, because some people won't see that. I mean, this is if you're. Just like if I'm going to hire somebody to pressure wash my house, I ain't doing it for free.
That's why I do my own.
Street.
Still costs you.
I know, it goes my whole day of meat.
We go in and do that for free.
So what we do after St. Patrick's Day, we've done it for the last 15 years, is we take 2 street sweepers into the neighborhoods to make sure the neighbors know that we are doing our best to clean up their streets, and that is at the request of St. Patrick's Day. And so far, yes, that has been part of a cost that we do charge. So we do charge St. Patrick's Day for the event.
For just a fee for the total event.
Right, garbage collection, roll carts, sweeping, sweeping the Sunday after.
And does that offset the whole cost or just part of the
It
cost?
just offsets part of the cost.
We'll probably start seeing these off each day.
Did we go to $50 an hour on that sweet tree?
Fairly simply, yes.
So we went to $20 an hour on the blower operator. And then the street sweeping is at $26 an hour unless y'all are suggesting something different on that.
50.
Oh, you said 50, okay.
Yeah, that way it covers the cost of the machinery, gas, everything.
Get Jeff over there smiling.
Alright, the traffic- Public Works traffic electrician is proposed at $60 per hour per employee. That would be the equipment and the electrician. And then again, those are services only, they're only charged if needed and requested.
These are up and above the normal stuff that we do on a day.
Right, these are, and that's the whole idea around cost recovery for special events and user fees. They're meant to cover the cost for the entity or who is requesting services that are above and beyond what your tax dollars, you know.
Well, and I think it's very important for people to, when you do that, also list the amount of events that we're having to administer. Because it's not a small amount. I don't know too many other municipalities have the amount that we do.
And I would, without doing an actual for statistics, the number of these events that are requesting these services for special events, are they themselves doing this as a fundraiser for their entity?
Oh, they are.
So,
And some of them are
And
making
again,
a
hospitality,
lot
we
of money.
offset their
And
costs
they-
and structures. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
the electricity box hookup is $20 per box, water tap hookup is $10 per tap, and then administration, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, is 12% of the total invoice. So whatever's on that invoice would be assessed as 12% administrative fee.
Now, we currently, the electricity box hookup, we currently do a lot of that already. This is up and beyond that.
I think the Cornbread Festival will be the easiest one. You know, everything's locked out there now. It's when our guy goes back, flips the switch. Next time somebody wants to use it, plug something in, make sure the electricity's there, drives off.
Got it.
So it's a 2-minute hit. They do it for Soda City every week. There's 13 or 14 boxes down there.
Just one last thing to point out, of course, this is a new approach for the city. So we do have in the proposed ordinance that will come before you right now, an implementation date or effective date of October 1st to allow for setup of the process, of course, communications and being able to administer it.
And it captures events already in the pipeline. So we want to kind of start educating the public, notice people. There's a lot of these standard events they've already submitted that they're doing them. So we felt like October.
Yeah.
would be good.
There'll be some shops or something.
Yeah, but Daniel's already made the point, this is what we talk about, the messaging behind this, and this is our job, is to be able to message these types of changes and why we're doing it and why it's important.
I think even letting the
all
public know
events.
about all those events, that entire list of events that we do. I'm sure
Yeah.
people don't even know that that's how many. And
But
I
this
think
also ensures that we're delivering the service to our residents and businesses that are paying. This is up and beyond all that. So this means that we're not taking away from.
Correct.
Funding
Core-
that
core.
is focused
That's
to
right.
the
Competency.
core. And I
Yeah.
think that's the message you gotta send.
Correct.
is
That's right.
This keeps us providing the service that we provide to the residents and businesses here.
Where is and I know y'all thought about this, where is the administering of this going to be housed?
That's what Ms. Wilson sort of touched on.
Right now it is still with CPD, but we've talked about over time and we want to kind of nail that down as we're standing this up with the third party vendor. If it's time to have someone outside of CPD administering it, touching all the different departments.
Do you have like an example of that third party that's doing this in other municipalities?
We have the third party vendor already under contract, so to speak, the is it off-duty solution, extra duty solutions? And then Greenville has a great example. Where else have we looked at? West Columbia. I mean, honestly, we are amazed that even some of the smaller entities who have this function.
Because it's
stood
not,
up
I mean, it's
with-
obviously not just CPD, it's like every department.
Right, and so they will, I mean, a lot of it still falls on them, even with what the other departments do.
Who
The
coordinates with
majority
Parks
of
and
the
Rec, who
events.
coordinates with water.
Right, but we think we should have probably an office of special events that has someone who's liaisoning with all the different.
That's a really good idea.
departments.
This is a great way for us to.
Yeah,
Now you're, right, now you're, well, we were providing it for free, then now we're not. Well,
Yes.
now the expectation level is different. So I
Correct.
think you're right. I think
Yeah.
you gotta, now you have a customer. Before you
That's
had
right.
a.
Customer service,
yeah,
point of
Yeah.
contact, and then
Now you.
tight timelines.
So I
in
think
terms-
I think that's smart.
Yeah.
A single point of entry.
Right.
Mhm.
Right, that can
Yeah.
coordinate. And so this will be a good opportunity to help us pilot and see how this works.
Yeah, good.
And so the Parks and Recreation with like, for example, the stage.
Right.
And
So
delivery
those
of a
are-
stage.
Right, you have Parks and Recreation is proposing additional adjustments to theirs that we talked about last time, we're not talking about those today, those were.
They were minor.
Parks and Recreation is an entire ordinance as well related to Parks and Recreation, special events or uses of park facilities and park services. So this schedule and stuff spelled out. These are services that just have gone for years without any sort of associated cost or fee with them. And we've talked about for a while, it's been definitely a different. And I think too, from the mayor, the mayor's mentioned this a lot too, as we look at. And we've talked a little bit about our revenue streams in the sense of what it costs to provide city services. Providing those costs based on what we collect from our property taxes base, this is not for those services, so that's.
Correct.
These are above and beyond.
Well, do you think by July we'll have that 1 point administrator or liaison in place when all this goes into effect?
Not by July, but hopefully we're working towards it by October.
October, okay.
I don't know about the single point of entry, that's, I think. part of it.
Can I just make a suggestion? Can you just start at January 1? So there's no confusion.
3 months of revenue.
Um,
We just talked 3 months of revenue.
And observation, there's a lot of the. big
October
events.
1 is the federal visitor year.
So, and that's what TK's probably tuning into that, and she does need to put a date in the ordinance, correct?
So, well, to,
From 0 to 60, so.
Yeah, I mean,
I think you either gotta do it July 1 or, I don't know, I mean,
July 1.
here's what, we start getting all these different dates, people
Mhm.
can't figure it out.
okay, well, we definitely can't say July 1, because we've just gotta have time to stand everything up, but
Well, couldn't you-
January is
Couldn't
fine.
you do July 1 with the rate structure? I mean, we may not have the administrative piece done and all that, but couldn't you do the rate structure that way? And then we'll build into the administration.
We could, and so you were saying hypothetically, which I think that's how we kind of got to October, we were looking at events in the pipeline. So if someone's already submitted for an event that has to come to your agenda, for example, by resolution, because those are the ones that are on public property or have alcohol service, we wouldn't, if the event is between July 1 and October, we wouldn't charge them the new rate
I think we
because they
should.
already have.
I think we should charge the rate. I just don't think you get to the total invoice, that administration.
Yeah,
Some of those
we would
pieces,
just be
but-
doing it internally. I just don't want anyone to, to say they didn't know and they had
Yeah, well, I
already
think
planned their event.
Maybe we at least could advertise, the officers and the fire marshals, because those are the guys who are the bulk of what we're talking about.
This would.
Yeah, at some point,
I think
we're
that'd be
still gonna
my
have people who
comment.
don't know. no
Yeah.
matter what.
Yeah, some-
It's 5 guys.
So let's do police and fire start July 1.
I agree.
On the structure, and then everything else falls in
So
October.
as soon as the ordinance
It's time to
passes.
Put the whole administration piece together.
And
Do that.
Got my vote.
But when the ordinance didn't just address their fees and not everything else. So they're not having two different ordinances.
This is written just fees.
Turn your feet. You can write that up.
That's the administration fee right there.
Yeah,
they're not ordinance.
he's 2% of it.
They're not ordinance now.
The officers and the marshals are not in ordinance now.
But they will.
Could we do the administrative fee now? Could we do the administrative fee July 1st? Well, asking. July 1st and then their fees and then implement the others starting.
It's called,
January
and the
1.
microphone needs your attention.
There's always, I mean,
Only two.
we can do it however you all want us to do it. I always, when you're approving a budget and there's changes, I just sort of like y'all to take that then and there, and we don't
talked
have
about
to.
officers for a while. and so
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
the key point. The other stuff is a lot newer because there's been no charge. I'd like us to see go with the fire and police starting
Okay.
July 1 and then have the balance roll in by October. Can we do that?
Do you want to publish it when?
Publish it just like we do now.
I mean, publish it when ahead of October, like for an education period or just,
Do it August. Will you be in a position that you're comfortable with the administration plan from there?
Could we not still do the ordinance?
Yeah.
Reading in June, but effective date is January 1.
is that good? If
Other
we
than-
publish them now and make the effective date January 1, I think that's going back to
For
what you
the
originally
others?
said, for everything else, and then for
I'm good
the
with that.
officers.
Yeah.
The only thing that we really probably need to do July 1 with the officers would be the administrative fee.
Right.
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 We'll figure
with that.
that, we'll figure out how to do that.
It has to be separate.
How are you going to account for this revenue stream now? Is it gonna be a special events fee, so all of this gets accounted for, so we might know?
In a
It-
fund,
So
yes,
I think it'd be interesting for us to know
it will be,
if special events fees provide X amount of revenue, we
absolutely.
might need to grow the office a little bit to provide better
Well,
service.
you know where it's going from. All you're doing is taking H-tax from here, you're giving it there, and then they're giving it back. So it's just, at some point, it's just gonna be a direct transfer.
But at the end of the day, though, I think it is important to monitor this, because I think part of this is understanding, how we're changing, some of the behavior, because at the end of the day, we really do want police and fire on duty for police and fire.
That's right.
I mean, I hate to say that, but I really don't want my police officer standing by a barricade unless, versus patrolling. So some of this is also making it where, we get the benefit of why we have police and fire. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all works out, not just money wise, but also behavior wise for the city.
This may have an impact on the implementation of the amplifier plans. Because special events could go into the amplifier.
That had been discussed at one point.
I didn't know we were to
No way, well, we got the plan, we just haven't done it yet.
I'll be interested to see if any requests for events come in, but it sort of is what it is. It'll all shake itself out. If we advertise now with an effective date for fees in January, I'm curious if there's gonna be some people piling on events between now. But, it's sort of,
You think so?
Hey, they all.
I don't know,
that's the
Mike.
thing, is they all
Run the
put their
same court.
applications in
75
for
case,
you're gonna shut it down, shut it down.
that's true.
The majority.
Yeah,
I would say have an effective part of events occurring after such date. Otherwise, everybody's
gonna,
we have some
gonna-
that already follow a year ahead.
Yeah, they're
So
gonna,
I think you have to have an effective.
yeah, that's my only concern. Seriously, I'm saying that in jest.
I mean,
but-
I gotta be honest, I plan an event a year from now. Okay, well, insurance goes up, this goes up, I'm canceling
That's
the
what I'm saying.
event.
Any event that occurs after
Call for
January
call.
1 should be the fee, no matter when they put in their application.
If it occurs after January.
It's clean and easy for everybody to wrap their head.
Yeah,
That event.
that's not gonna trust people who are gonna put it in now to do it now, but yeah.
Let y'all figure that out.
Yeah,
We'll
That's why
figure it out.
everybody's just gonna apply this year.
That's why y'all get paid the big bucks.
But if they apply, that's what I'm saying, if we advertise it now, effective January 1 for events after January 1, then
That's just all.
maybe there will be people who will go ahead and apply between now and January 1. You see what I'm saying? But it's fine. We'll work through it. We'll work through it. But you do want the officers and the marshals to start effective July 1.
We've been talking about it since last budget season about that and looking at the different services and this and that. So I do think we need to go ahead and pull that trigger July 1.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Great. So that wraps up the conversation on special events. The next item is going to be the other item that city council had comments on with regarding our police false alarm, and Chief Holbrook will come up and speak to those changes.
This Wilson and council, just to recap what we touched on the week before last. We were looking at revamping our current ordinance really to reflect more market rate and best practices with I guess an outcome of changing some behavior. We respond to a little bit over 4,400 false alarms, and Councilman Duvall, we had that discussion, how many of those are false, but you see how she's modified that to answer that question. Yeah, very good. And you to keep wrong like everybody's gonna explain it. It's all about surrounding yourself by great people. But as you can see, that's a 94% false alarm rate. That's incredible, which is really what we're trying to change. So our legal staff went through our previous ordinance and made some line changes to correspond with and integrate with this software, the Crowell software. Also along the lines of some of your questions last week, I use Charlotte as an example. They've been a user since 2005. They decreased their false alarms by 61%, and they also have a 96% collection rate. So
Go back, how did they reduce it?
Because where they corrected a behavior where people, it was inconsequential.
So you're saying that the majority of this is human error versus
Human error or not maintaining, your equipment. So you've got to, or and some of it, I guess it would be the human error is just new employees, tripping a commercial holdup alarm or something accidentally. And so it's really putting a focus on making sure your equipment's operating, correctly, and that your employees have training on the activation. A lot of this stuff, for those that have alarms in their residence, you can have an activation. They'll call you as a homeowner, and you can say, hey, this is, a false alarm, and it never gets sent to 911. Mm-hmm. So this is only what's going to 911. And it's still, pretty voluminous. Wow. The fee structures. So the first two, this is all within would be within annually. The first two are essentially free. They will get notifications that they have had a false alarm and they need to correct that, and it'll be an education piece. 3rd through 7, as discussed the last time we had that broken out, there was the suggestion was to include the 3rd event through the 7th event the same way, and that's $100 with each occurrence. 8 and 9 is $250, and then the 10th or more.
And that's based on what time period?
That's all within a year.
So it's all based on a year. So it'll be an annual thing. So you get a reset button at the end of the year.
Yes, sir.
I might want to make that explicit. Is that in the ordinance that way for Jazz about the annual nature?
I don't know if, I don't know if it says that specifically.
I think you need to,
Yeah.
because when somebody looks at that, they're like, if this is backlog, or if I have it over a 2-year period, that's
That's a
not
good
fair.
point.
It is in the ordinance in the fire.
Okay, annually. Thank you.
It starts July 1.
Goes with the fiscal year.
Okay. You catch that?
So we-
TJ?
Is that what you wanted this week?
Yeah, stake it with the
You said
fire.
fiscal year?
Yeah.
And Teresa, there's no way somebody could legally challenge this.
Try, but no.
Okay.
no.
You doing very,
It's pretty common.
okay.
It's common.
So as it stands,
Either, is Colite part of the 94%?
No, I don't, I gotta be honest, I don't think I've ever seen anybody show up at Colite, so, hey, that's. We're good.
When you quickly ask the challenge question, so I had.
No, I'm just curious, cause I know I'm gonna get the email from somebody. I know. You can't do this. Say, oh, yeah, you can.
Well, I mean, even the fine, really, for the time you figure out how much officer time and everything that goes that pulls them away from real stuff, especially the majority of it's human error.
But that's the whole key is the money's the vehicle to get to quit wasting time.
Yeah, I mean, they call,
and
if
that's-
the fire alarm goes off in my house, they call me first, and then they call my wife, and then they call one of the kids. So, I mean, they don't call the police department
Right.
first.
They even call my
They call
brother.
us first.
Even my brother gets a call before that.
so depending on the alarm, it's a 1-car, 2-car response, could be, if it's a bank robbery, could be even more. So obviously it's staff, it's a drain on staffing, and it's also dangerous. Some of these are emergency responses and that's.
Well, I think just the data you've seen from Charlotte shows that if people start maintaining their system and they train properly, it eliminates.
Well, if we have similar results, that knocks us down to just over 7 responses a day. That would be just significant, yeah.
All right, I'm good.
Yep.
Probably good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Feel nice.
Mayor's article came.
Okay. Last item for discussion
one,
is
hey.
just a review of the proposed budget, the budget calendar for the remaining activities of the budget, proposed budget discussion. So, as Madam City Clerk reminded us, we will be sending these advertisements to the newspaper tomorrow, May 17th. For publication on May 22nd, those 15 days that's required before the notice that's required before the public hearing. And first reading on June 6th. Before we go there though, we do have one more budget workshop on your schedule for May 23rd. It's intended to be a wrap up of everything we've already discussed.
So I wanted to talk to you all about, I mean, we certainly love all our time with you to wrap up and answer any questions or provide clarifications. That wrap up is typically going to be very similar to the presentation that we would give as part of the public hearing and first reading. So if you wanted us to, if you all would prefer not to meet again on the 23rd, and we go right into the wrap up and summary as part of the June 6th public hearing, we can do that. But I didn't want to, it's been a lot of information. So if we needed to do a quick summary and wrap up.
We traditionally have not taken hospitality or anything at the budget meeting. We tend to do that on and off meeting so that we can focus on it. Is your anticipation that we try to do that on an off day in June? Or could we push it to July like we did last year?
I know we, staff, would really like to have it done before July. But
It
you
needs to be
can
done.
determine a date
So
that works with
can we
you.
look at a June date the focus on H tax and A tax. I think we've got to have some discussion here to wrap that up, because I know there's different thoughts about stuff, and, you know, we haven't had a chance to see what's been awarded and this and that, so obviously we need time to review that. And that can't be done, there's not time before June sixth that works.
Okay.
So can we look at that meeting in between the sixth and the 20th?
Yes, sir.
And then that way, after we've had the second reading of the budget, we could do the H tax and A tax on the 20th, and that would end us the fiscal year, if that works. Instead of having a separate special call meeting, does that work?
So doing
So the
H tax and A tax on June 20th, that
Or
works.
the June
We can meet the
13th.
week before and have the roundtable narrow it down, and then we can do it right after we do the second reading of the budget.
I'm showing a work session on your calendar, it's probably a
13th.
placeholder on the 13th.
Then let's just use that for H tax and A tax.
Is that what you're showing? Okay.
Does that work?
Yes.
June the 13th.
At 3:00.
At 3?
My daughter's birthday.
Oh.
Very relevant.
Yeah.
All right, so Teresa, as an aside, I just got an email from one of my senior project managers.
Okay.
So there are two recent road or lane closures. Now granted, I'm gonna preface this by saying it's New York City and Los Angeles. So I get it. So New York City, full road closure permit cost is $5,000 plus the cost of a flagman.
Oh my.
The number of flagmen required is dictated by where the road closure occurs in the city. New York City lane closure permit cost is $2,500. Typically, no flagman is required. Los Angeles / Beverly Hills, California road lane closure permit cost ranges from $1,600 to $2,200. This is for a one-day closure, and a barricade company is required to be on site. The barricade company cost is typically between $3,000 to $5,000.
Okay.
I'll
Not
continue
even
to-
in the ballpark.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And again, I get it. It's New York and, you
Right.
know,
We're
California.
paying union labor.
But it's the relevancy between 5,000 a day to zero is not relevant. So the answer is we have to understand, and again, it's a lot about covering your costs that are not part of what you pay in taxes. But it's also about changing people's behavior through the cost of the value of it. It's value oriented.
Mhm.
So I'll get more of these, I'm sure.
Well,
I'll just-
share, yeah, just share those with me and we will bring that back with a tiered schedule.
We should see what DOT charges.
Okay.
Not enough, so can't help us fix our, take care of our
Robert said he
meetings.
can get that information.
Thank you, Robert.
All of the cut. We got a lot more money than we had this year. We lost 10, we didn't get as much. We got 10 million less.
That's not great.
So that means no budget workshop next week, is that, or what's the plan?
I will not be here, so y'all. I'm not.
Nope, I'm out then.
I'll be in here.
Council.
We'll make sure we have a thorough presentation in conjunction with your public hearing,
If
first
there's
reading.
some updates based on this meeting and some more detail on the fire and other, if you'd send that out, and that way
Okay.
everybody could have it well in advance of the 6th.
We'll
I
do,
think that'd be helpful.
That will help.
yes,
Certainly, but that
we will
helps.
definitely do that.
All right, I guess it's the magical time.
So that.
Are you going through the public hearing notice?
So just-
to read them out?
Right, so in your packet, there's a lot of public hearing notices and a lot of public hearings that will be on June 6th. The budget ordinance is in your packet, that's a draft of another revision. The water and sewer rate proposal, or water and sewer rate ordinance. And also an ordinance for the fire hydrant, the park and recreation, their adjusted fees. Special event fees, as we discussed today, the suggested change or the changes just discussed. And then the police false alarm that the police chief just went through. So quite a collection of public hearing notices that will be on your June 6th meeting. Very productive budget work session. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you all
you.
so much.